This is perhaps a good time then to mention the front pages of today's Press and Journal and The Scotsman. Over 2,500 energy workers, business leaders, supply chain employees and community representatives have backed an immediate end to the North Sea windfall tax. They warn that the northeast of Scotland is at grave risk of losing world-leading skills. The letter comes, of course, after Harbour Energy announced 250 job losses. We'll get thoughts from Jeff and Andy in just a sec, but first of all, a reminder of what the Energy Minister, Michael Shanks, told this podcast last week when we asked if he backed an immediate end to the Energy Profits Levy.
It is personal to everybody in the sense that we all know someone in Scotland who works in the oil and gas industry. I've got family and friends who work offshore, and so it is important, and I recognise that. I think we have recognised the issue around the EPL. James Murray was in Aberdeen engaging with the sector as well. We heard a lot of views, which is why the allowances were changed in the budget. That was a direct response to what we heard from industry, and industry welcomed that change. The EPL will fall in 2030, and I think the consultation's still open, or it's about to close on the future of that, because we want to give a sort of sustainable plan for what the future of taxation is in the North Sea. But understandably, I hope you will say I'm not going to comment on wider tax policy in the short term. I do think there's a wider sort of point about this, and it's why I said to the Harbour Energy announcement, we're going to get a plan in place, because look, any job losses in any part of the economy are devastating for those people, for their families, for the community they come from. And, I always recognise those on a really personal level, the impact that those have. But there is a need for us to sort of recognise this isn't something that just suddenly started happening in July last year with the election of a Labour government. A third of the oil and gas workforce have lost their jobs in the past 10 years, more than 70,000 people. The North Sea has been in transition for a long time, and governments have failed to grasp the fact that that means you have to plan for the future.
That's Michael Shanks. Jeff, talk to us then about these 2,500 people who have signed this letter today. Some might hear this and think this is rich oil and gas companies who are being taxed, complaining about being taxed. What is their issue? What are they saying?
Well, it's all the greatest hits, really. I mean, it's an amazing amount of people to have signed the letter. I can tell you that the local chamber informed me that when they've done an open letter in the past, the most amount of signatures they've had is 1,000, and they've actually had 2,500, which just tells you the strength of feeling across the region. And I think, as you pointed out in your opening there, this isn't just oil and gas workers, this is all industry. So this is from different business sectors across the region. They recognise the indirect impact on them, but also charities, third sector organisations, Aberdeen Cyrenians, a homeless charity, Cash for Kids charities. They all recognise the impact of this policy on the on particularly in the region, but the entire sector, of course, and there's impact across the Scotland and the UK, because energy workers reliant on oil and gas are not just in the northeast, but concentrated here. A couple of points really, and the letter itself, I'd refer it to everyone. It just makes the point that why are we inhibiting our own domestic oil and gas supply when we are just relying ever more on carbon-heavy imports from overseas. We don't get the economic benefit, we don't get the jobs benefit. But pointing out, as we did last week with the Energy Minister, that even the Climate Change Committee says that we're going to need significant oil and gas until 2050. So let's produce as much as we can from our own domestic supply. But one point I wanted to make is I was watching the Chancellor's business questions yesterday, and she kind of made the point that she said that this reflects the fact that energy companies have enjoyed huge profits since Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, and it's right when people's bills have gone up that we ask the energy companies making those profits to contribute a little bit more. Well, the windfall has not existed in some 2 years, and prices have well gone below that of the Ukraine-Russia crisis when it initially that tragedy started. But just a couple of points I just don't understand. So firstly, her old employers, Lloyds Banking Group, made 6.3 billion profit in 2024. That is a grand total of 6.3 billion more than Harbour Energy, who have just lost all these jobs. Are we going to start taxing Lloyds Banking Group at 78%? I suggest we probably aren't. And a nice little example, I believe you've used this example before, Callum, if I heard you correctly in discussion with Ed Miliband, but Greggs made nearly £300 million more than Harbour Energy in 2024, and that's selling sausage rolls. That's going some. So the whole thing is absurd. It is an unfair tax. It should come off. We need to motivate investment in the sector, as Murdo has said in his contribution to the programme. And let's take a pragmatic approach to this, and ultimately sustaining that supply chain, that world-class supply chain, as at such time renewables is available at scale.
Well, I mean, I have to say, I'm more a steak bacon, a yum guy, if I'm being honest.
Sausage rolls are awesome,
I mean,
Greggs. Honestly, they're a different class. You should try a sausage roll, bud.
I have. Listen, I've been doing this a long time. I'm not against the sausage rolls. I'm just saying, if I have my choice, and if they're warm enough, if they're hot enough in there, I'll go steak bacon and maybe a yum to top things off.
A steak
However,
bacon,
I do
a
feel that
yum.
we may be in some danger of going off topic here.
Can I just throw in a
look,
pink jammy as well? A cheeky pink jammy. They're amazing.
Right. Greggs, if you'd like to sponsor the podcast, we're here for you. Andy, go on.
This is now territory where Callum's thinking, I might edit this because this is rank. I thought our discussion, just to get back to Murdo's point, I actually really enjoyed our discussion with Michael Shanks last week. I thought he was excellent. He was completely unafraid of any topic. He wouldn't have given answers that everybody wanted to everything, but I thought he dealt with it really well, and I was impressed with him, actually. I did mention to him, though, what I called the sniff test at the time, and I think ultimately that's the problem that we face here. You know, if I broaden this out from oil and gas to a bit wider into energy, you know, we have a growing planet, we have a growing world, we need more energy, and we know that at the moment we don't have the scale of renewables or the scale of storage for that to fill the gap, so we need to use fossil fuels. And why are we even getting ourselves into a system and a situation where we risk not being able to use our own and having to import somebody else's, which A, costs us money and B, costs us carbon at the same time because we're importing it? It doesn't make sense. As I said last week, it doesn't pass the sniff test. And therefore, you know, you have to look at the tax regime and say, is that helping or hindering? And frankly, I think there's only one answer here. I would, as somebody who is deeply committed to an energy transition and thinks it's necessary and could be very economically successful as well, ultimately you've got to say, look, stop taxing these people in this punitive way, and instead let's work with those who are making profit from fossil fuels to make sure that certain amounts of that profit are filtered back in, as they would be anyway, to renewable development, to community benefit work. And actually, rather than taking it into treasury coffers, let's actually make sure that the profits are spent in the places we need to spend them to get the transition moving faster and faster and faster. I think that's something that everybody could fairly easily come together on.
Here.